Belated.
Anybody who, let's see, Jeff and Latoya, I just want to make sure you schedule a time with me.
Okay, I'll let her know.
Great.
Okay.
Chelsea, does that feel like we could do a check-in with Alon or not? It's up to you.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure he would be interested.
Awesome. I heard you were in town and I missed you.
Yeah, we were going to go to HIR and
I know
then
she
it
said it
was
was like
like,
rain and it was like not happening.
yeah.
It's okay. One can have a Shabbat at home too. It's all right. I don't want people to feel too guilty. I mean, I think people should go to shul. It's good community building and it's important to learn how to daven, but okay. Um, so Mariana, I have something set with you. Jamie, that's up to you. If you wish to, I'm always happy to check in. I don't know if you need one.
I would like
Uh,
one. I just need a little bit of time, so I'm
yeah,
hoping work slows down a little bit.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So just make sure you do that. That would be
yeah,
great. I think we haven't done it for a while, so I'd love
yeah.
to.
We're overdue.
Um, yeah, so Jeff and Latoya, make sure you set up with me, okay? Gabby, you're going to set up with me. Marianne, I have. James and I met once. We're going to meet again. And Chelsea. Great, great. So everybody, I'm putting that on your radar that you should take care of it. Sometime in the month of January would be good. How does that feel? Yeah, so don't feel like it doesn't have to be tomorrow. I don't have time tomorrow anyway. But just set up a time so we can talk about timelines and what's doing. Some of you have real timelines, so we want to make sure that they happen in a timely manner. The class today is about something that, and I know we've talked about, and some of you may have been on a class like this. I really want to focus on how to bring spirituality into every day of your life. And I really believe, I really do. I'm not just saying this because I'm your teacher. I really believe in saying blessings, brachot, brachot. I really believe in it because it's easy to learn. It's easy to learn the words. It's easy to say them. Even if it takes you time, the whole thing is one sentence long. So how much time is it really going to take you? And it's a great way to become a part of the observant Orthodox world because you I mean, it's very unusual to see an Orthodox person take an apple or a sandwich or a piece of cake or a drink and not make a bracha first, not make a bracha first. This to me feels like your entry level in some ways. Does that make sense to people? And the other really nice thing about it is you don't have to read Hebrew fluently. Like you can do the transliteration. We're going to actually practice even saying them. And I want you to tell me if you think it would be helpful if I recorded it maybe and sent them to you. I mean, I really want to hear from you what's helpful. I made you, I don't know if anybody clicked on the links, but there's one that's about the blessings which we're gonna go through. And then I did this for somebody who converted with us. I made her like a cheat sheet, a little chart. And I sent it to James already beforehand because we met about this. And I want you to print it and stick it in your bag, in your knapsack, put it in your Siddur for Shabbat. Just have it with you all the time. Or have it on the wall in your kitchen if that's helpful. I mean, you can print it as many times as you want. You could laminate it. You could do whatever you want. You can fold it up. But the more you'll do this, like if you set yourself a goal that by the summertime or by Pesach or whatever it is, you'll be saying brachot, blessings, over every piece of food you eat, as a rule, that gives you an opportunity to connect without knowing, davening is one of the hardest parts of becoming Orthodox. It's in Hebrew. There's a lot of it. It can feel overwhelming. You come to shul and there's, 2 to 3 hours and you don't know what to do with yourself because there's so much Hebrew basically. So that can feel overwhelming. But brachot, blessings, you can say it all day at your own space. Oh, she's wait, Jeff sent me that I'm wrapping up work. I guess it's not a gift for you that she's wrapping up. We were hoping, but what can you do? Wrapping up. Tell her, send her a text back saying, I prefer if you wrap up a present for me than wrap up work. No, just kidding. So I
Vouch for how
really,
busy she is there at work because we work together and I can vouch. It has
oh,
gotten really
hilarious. I
busy there.
forgot. Oh, I know. Oh, I know she works hard. Believe me, I'm just
Yeah.
making fun,
Yeah,
spoofing.
yeah, yeah.
And we actually spoke about maybe moving it to 7:45 or 8 o'clock for Latoya because she so often is rushing, rushing, rushing. That's something to talk about as well. And I asked her and it wasn't clear, so maybe when we speak, I'll discuss with her. Um, so okay, and it gives you an opportunity to mouth the Hebrew syllables, which is good. And then I could imagine, I know that Chelsea has taken the plunge and started learning Hebrew, Duolingo. I don't know how that's going for you, but once you have that chart, you can slowly start sounding out once you know them in the transliteration. So I feel like it would just be a shame not to use this like kind of easy entryway into what it means to live a spiritual Orthodox life without having to take on yourself the mantle of davening, of tefillah, which is so overwhelming. So we already had a class about the morning blessings, right? And I gave you and that I still really believe you should do that, because we have to find easy entryways so that it won't feel like so much that you won't do it. When one takes on oneself a task that's too much, then you just end up not doing it because it's too much. So what we're going to talk about in this class is, and I know some of you may know some of this, but we're going to go over it anyway. We're going to go over the actual blessings, what we say, what the words mean, really do kind of a deep dive. So for once, at the very least, you know what you're doing. And also a little bit about the halachot, the Jewish law that's connected with it. And I want to tell you something. I have to tell you something funny, if I may. I think it's funny. I love telling this story. When I was a high school teacher, only 1 year in my life, I believe it will remain only 1 year in my life that I was a high school teacher. Not my first choice. I love connecting with kids. Don't love being a high school teacher. But when I was in Bet Tfilah in Baltimore for 2 years, one of the years I worked in the high school and I taught a class called rabbinics. And rabbinics just basically meant, teaching the holidays, teaching anything having to do with being Jewish, more or less. A lot of the kids in the class, the vast majority was ninth graders. The majority of them were not observant, and some of them were not what I would call halachically Jewish. Hey, James. Meaning that, their mom wasn't Jewish, or, never converted or converted reform, whatever it is. But that wasn't my issue at all. I taught everybody the same. As you know, I try to treat everybody the same. But they didn't come from the same kind of background. When you grow up in a halachically observant household, you know things. And one of the things that they did in the school is something called a brachot. Brachot are blessings. Brachos is the kind of Ashkenazic way of saying it. And the people who were most of the teachers for Jewish studies were actually more right-wing. They came from the yeshiva world. So they call it a brachos bee. So it's like a spelling bee, except that it's about which bracha do you say over which food. Okay, like for example, there's a bracha that you make over vegetables, which is Borei Pri Adama, that God created the fruits of the earth. Okay, vegetables. So we'll go into it. I'm just giving you. And then there's a general one called Shahakol Ni'ah B'Dvaro, that everything happened with God's word. Everything that didn't grow from the ground and whatever, it just gets into this not catch-22.
Catch-all?
Catch-all. He wasn't listening. Catch-22. That's so funny. So yeah, a catch-all into this one. So if I ate potatoes, like let's say hash browns, they look like potatoes, they act like potatoes, you make the blessing over fruits of the earth. The vegetables and fruit are just all called fruits, like fruits of the earth is just a general term. But what if you're eating potato chips? Or what if you're eating mashed potatoes, which don't look like potatoes, even though they taste like potatoes? So there are certain halachot that tell you what to make on it. Like if it doesn't look like potatoes, then, because a mash could be a cauliflower mash, it could be a celeriac mash. I've made both of those things. They look like mashed potatoes, but they're not. So once it loses its form, you generally make the general blessing on it. So there's a big difference between taking an apple and eating applesauce. I'm not talking about applesauce with chunks. If applesauce have chunks in it, then you see pieces of apple. So everybody that's a general thing. We're going to go into that, but I just wanted, okay. So and potato chips, by the way, because everybody knows they're made from potatoes and they kind of look like a slice of potato usually, you actually make the blessing from fruits of the earth, which is an interesting, I didn't know that, by the way, until I had this brachos bee. So we're learning all the rules, all the laws, so that the kids can compete. Everybody get what it was, brachos bee? Like you ask questions. What bracha do you make on this? Okay, great. And one of the kids raises his hand and says to me, Rabbanit, what do you make on marijuana brownies? And I want to tell you, in 1 second, 19 pairs of eyes looked at me and did not look away while we discussed it. They like that. It was amazing. And I said to him, why are you asking about, like, I really didn't get it, whatever. And I said, why do you want to know? You can't, like, it's not legal. He says, well, it's legal in this state and this state. I'm like, oh my God, he knows. And this state. And then I had this like light bulb moment. I felt like God whispered in my ear and like, teach them about the brachot through the marijuana brownies. What do you care how you teach them? They'll listen to you. And we literally learned the halachot. And what I did was, that was at the end of class and went home. And the next class when I came, I had researched it because I didn't know the answers. Sorry. I really didn't know. I never ate them. I don't know that I'll ever eat them in my life. And I didn't even know what they look like, right? They look like brownies. Do they have little pieces of green in them? I didn't know. And I came back and right away, like, Ravani, do you remember the question? I'm like, did I remember the question? I researched it. We're going to divide the class and we're going to say, who says this one? Who says this one? And then we had a debate. The whole class, we had a debate about it. And it was fascinating and amazing. And at the end, finally, you know, most of the kids said one thing, which was wrong. And then the small group said this. And slowly, as they debated, they actually all pretty much came around to the correct bracha. But I'm telling you, I had them in the palm of my hands, the whole class. I'm like, I wish I could teach everything like that. And it actually was a really good way to teach it. So I will teach you also that way because I do think it's a good way to teach because it's fun. And at the end, they said, well, what's the answer? Like, we need the answer. Like, yeah, I gave them the answer.
So are you suggesting
anyway,
that we should all make brownies?
Exactly. Marijuana brownies, bring them and we'll all make the bracha together. That was what I meant. And this is recorded, so that's terrible.
Okay, well.
So that female Orthodox rabbi, she tells people to take drugs. Like, I can see that getting out. No. But if you do, you'll know what bracha to make. Hey, Latoya, believe it or not, we're talking about marijuana brownies. You probably didn't expect that, but Jeff can fill you in. I just had to share that story because it's such a fun story. I still love sharing the story. And by the way, I came to evening services that same day, and you give there in that shul, you give like a 10-minute discussion between between the evening services. And I said to the people in the it was their kids basically who I was teaching, and I said, oh, you know, I had this interesting thing with the kids, marijuana brownies, and I'm like, immediately riveted, and they're like, well, teach us. So that's what I taught them that day. It was really cool. But that's what I'm saying. Do you see that there's intricacies about the blessings? I just wanted to give you that. Okay, great. Do I have your attention? I'm so happy because it's a little boring to just learn one after the other, but there's actually logical reasons for things. Like, for example, do you make the same bracha, given what I told you, on orange juice and on oranges? What do you think?
No.
No, right? No, because orange juice is not the original form. You know it's orange, although, you know, it could be pineapple juice, could be mandarin juice, although they're all the same. No, they're not. Pineapple's a different blessing. So we don't make the same blessings on liquids. In fact, all liquids, except for one, I believe, is that general. What is it, Jamie? Tell us. Do you remember? Go.
Wine.
Yeah, wine and grape juice. Excellent. Okay, great. Oh, good. I'm seeing smiles. Okay, so we're going to learn about it, and I'm just going to give you a quick, let's tell you, I know we're always pushing you like you're finishing work, and I'm so sorry that you have to run from one to the other. And we need to talk about whether to move the time because it doesn't seem fair to Latoya. And Jamie's like, I work with her. She really works hard. I'm like, I didn't need you to convince me. I know she works hard. I know you would be here on time if you could. I get it. I'm not like upset. But when we have our check-in, we're going to talk about that. If we'll ask if the class can shift a little bit. That's the other thing, Latoya, that you and Jeff will schedule a check-in with me sometime in the month of January. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but sometime in the month of January. All right. With that very long introduction, hello, we have a guest, Gabby. Hey.
Hello.
Hi, nice to see you. So
Nice to see
I
you.
apologize, your name?
Josh.
Josh. Oh, we just said Josh before. Now I'll remember because Josh is the other one who teaches. So Josh, do you say blessings, brachot?
I try to.
That's a good answer.
Usually when we're doing just like specifically like when I'm going to bench, I will.
Well, I'm talking actually about the ones before food. Those are shorter and easier.
I know. I will like if I plan to bench, I will say like a bracha before.
Oh, that's
like
nice.
what my intention
So
is.
we're gonna invite you and encourage you with Gabby, both of you, to go on this trip, journey together and to start saying them together because that's the way you're going to create this part of the Orthodox lifestyle. It's such an important part of the lifestyle and pretty easy. Like I'm trying to give you things that won't feel, okay. Let's see if this works. But that's not what I wanted to share. Give me a second. Yeah, this is the one. Okay. Let me make this a little bigger. Does that feel good? Good size or a little bigger? It's good? Okay. If it isn't, like, let me know. Okay. We're going to go over this because I know you have it in your sheet, but I really want to do it with you. So this is actually, to me, very interesting. There's only one blessing that is biblical. Does everybody remember that we spoke a lot of times about biblical and rabbinic? That they're not. Who wants to try to jump in and say, like, how do you see the difference between biblical and rabbinic? And it's okay if you get it wrong. Yeah, go for it. Who was that? Chelsea. Yeah.
Yeah. Biblical is things that were actually in the Torah, and then rabbinic is rabbis sort of like not interpreting what is in the Torah, but like adding on to that, like based on that intention.
Yes, beautiful. And actually, Chelsea, that was great. And actually, there's a level in the middle, but it's still biblical. And Chelsea, you touched on that. Because, for example, remember we said, do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Remember, did I tell you that joke? I told you that joke, right? Okay. Yes? Got the joke. Okay. So the rabbis interpreted not that you just can't put a lamb into milk, but there's a whole array of laws, dietary laws about meat and milk and chicken and all that. And the chicken is rabbinic because in the Torah, it's actually only meat. We talked about that. Yes?
Yeah.
Please tell. Okay, good. So that's the middle ground, but it has the level of biblical because it's the way it's interpreted by the rabbi. So that was exactly right the way you said it, Chelsea. It's not taking something from the Torah, it's adding to it. For example, Hanukkah. That's a good example of rabbinic because there was no Hanukkah in the Torah, but they added a holiday. But there's many like laws. So what is one of the laws? The only biblical blessing is what Josh was talking about. When you eat bread, bread made of one of the 5 grains, sprouts, remember barley, rye, oats, wheat, spelt. If you eat bread from one of those and hopefully made a blessing first, then there's a Birkat Hamazon or benching, which means to bless in Yiddish, because so many Yiddish words crept into the Orthodox language. That is written in the Torah. Oh, what's the translation, Martin? You ate,
Grace
and you will
after
eat.
meals.
No, that's Birkat Hamazon. That's close.
Oh.
The achalta. This is the phrase from the Torah. And you shall eat, and you shall be satisfied. Oh, here it is. And be satisfied and bless. That is written in the Torah. The rabbis turned that into the long benching that we do, which has 4 different blessings in it and many different parts. But that is biblical because it says it in the Torah. I should actually put did I put the source in here? Oh, no, that wasn't the source. Okay, I'm going to put the source of the verse in here so you know which is the biblical. And that's said after. That's not said before. That's said after, saying thank you, God. But the rabbis, the rabbinic interpretation, said, well, it can't be that you only bless after. You have to, like, thank God before. You have to ask a permission to eat. How could it be? Like, they saw it as obvious, and as if God was saying in the Torah, as if God is saying, well, obviously you're going to make a blessing before. I take that for granted, so I have to tell you to make a blessing after. Because once you're full, you're like, okay, I'm done, I'm leaving. Right? I'm full, I'm finished. But no. There are blessings to say after. That comes from the Torah. So that now sometimes the logic can work the other way. This happens to be the way the logic worked this time. So all these blessings that we say before are rabbinic. Does that mean we don't do them? Does not mean we don't do them. Let me tell you the difference. This is a little tricky, but this is the way logic and halakha works. Anything biblical, we always act more stringently. Anything rabbinic, we act more leniently. Now, how does that translate? Let me give you an example. If you can't remember, if you said what Josh called the grace after meals, the benching, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, People have heard everybody sing that. If you can't remember, we're stringent. And we say, then you have to say it again because you're obligated to say it. But if you can't remember if you said the blessing before, we're lenient and we say, I'm sorry, you can't just say God's name a second time, because for rabbinic, we're lenient. And that might seem funny to you. What is the difference between lenient and stringent? But in this case, it's being lenient and stringent about saying God's name. We don't just say God's name lightly. In fact, in other denominations, it's much more common to hear God's name said, and they don't consider it taking it lightly, but we would. We don't just say God's name. I use God's name because I wanted you to hear the real word. So it's for teaching purposes. Teaching purposes is very different. So
I was just about to ask about that because when Josh was teaching the class, there was a blessing. It wasn't like the blessings on food, but it began Brachot, and then he said a different word.
So I'm going to tell him, I never thought of discussing with him because he hadn't discussed that with me. I will mention to Josh and to Hannah, I believe in using it when we're teaching. If you learn Baruch Atah Hashem, then when you actually make the blessing, you're going to say Baruch Atah Hashem. Now, once you know it, and if you're just mentioning it, one second, Josh, I'll be with you in a second. I can see you want to say something. Then I understand it. But when you're learning, you have to learn the right word. So that to me is not taking it lightly or in vain, what's called. What did you want to say, Josh?
Just growing up with it, I learned it in reverse because like I knew God's name and we didn't say Hashem. And so like then you learn Hashem and then Elokeinu instead of Eloheinu.
Eloheinu. And that can be confusing when you go to say it. So for this class, because you need to learn the real thing, it is not helpful for me to teach you.
No.
It's just not helpful. You need to learn how to say it, Chelsea. So I don't blame Josh because it's not common to do that, but it's less common. He just didn't think of it that way. I'll discuss it with him to make sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was genuinely like curious about like whether, when you are supposed to use it and when you're not supposed to use it for, like, I know you're not supposed to use it in vain, but like, I noticed that you use it and he didn't. So I was just wondering whether that was like a personal thing or.
So it could be a little bit personal, but since I run this class, I will ask him if he does it again to do it that way. And I will tell him as a rabbi that it's okay. He just didn't think of it that way. He's just so not used to saying God's name unless you're actually making the bracha that he would just, and I don't know if Hannah would do it either. I don't know if did she do the candle lighting with you? The Hanukkah candle lighting? But it wasn't Hanukkah yet, but she still did it. I hope she used God's name because that's the way for you to learn it. So for teaching purposes, you think she did? Yeah, I also think she did. I think I might have even mentioned it to her. So thank you for pointing that out, Chelsea. But that's a good way to point out in Orthodox settings, one does not just walk around saying God's name. We'll always say Hashem. We would never say God's name. And so when you're teaching, so somebody who knows blessings, you just say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. They know how to say the real one. But until you know how to say the real one, it's just a bunch of jumbling. Like, what? I don't understand. Why am I not saying the real word? So Hashem means the name, and that's instead of God's name Adonai. It's just that's the way it's done. And Elokeinu is a way getting around saying Eloheinu, our God, for Elohim or Elokim. So we just naturally say Elokim. We don't even think about it. But people who are used to doing it, they automatically translate in their heads what it means. Until you know what it means, it's just confusing, I think.
It's really confusing.
Is everybody okay now with what I said, or did I confuse you? You're good. Okay, great. But thank you for pointing that out. So that was an example of how halacha works, Jewish law. How do you apply Jewish law to a real life situation? So biblical, we are more stringent to make sure you actually do it. Whereas rabbinic, we're lenient and we say, you can't say it a second time. Now, that's not true for you. First of all, most of you aren't Jewish yet, so that's one thing. But the second thing is you're doing it to learn. So I want you to learn it. So it's really important to me that you say it. All right? If you can't remember if you said it. But I mean, after a while, I assume you'll remember. But that's just an example. Okay. Now let's go and learn more about the actual blessings. So these are the blessings on food. They all begin the same way. And I know some of you know this already, but we're going to go over it anyway. I want you to stay on mute and say it with me. Okay, you can say it from the transliteration. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Again, Baruch. I know I say it with an Israeli accent. You can do Baruch, that's fine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. So I want to ask this group a philosophical question. It means, blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe. That's the beginning of all these blessings. What do you think that means, blessed are you? What do you think that's signifying? Any thoughts? Chelsea, try it.
I just assumed that it was like a reference to like holiness, like you are literally like the blessed.
I like that. I mean, I don't actually have an answer, by the way. I'm not going to like pull it out in the end and say, no, this is, I don't have a full answer for that. I always said it by rote, so I didn't think about it. I really like the way you said it, Chelsea. And the reason why it's nice to think about it is so that you give meaning to what you're saying. So you're actually recognizing in that moment that God is king, ruler of the universe. And the reason we say it over food specifically is because all food, you know, at some point has to do with the earth and with God creating the universe. Even if it's animals or fish, like they have to live in the water or on land and they eat, you know, things that grow. So everything comes back to what God created.
I was gonna say one thing.
Yeah,
and this
Josh.
it's related to just direct translations of Hebrew words. A lot of things that they'll be like capitalized, and it's like weirdly capitalized. So like sometimes you'll see a capital YOU, or like he.
That's
or
not
him,
weird. That should be, because it's like
and,
to a king.
And I think that it's cool because it shows the significance of the words, and it like
Nice.
it makes you focus on the importance of it. So I think that it's, you
You know what, you're right. And
traditionally
actually,
I was actually thinking the exact same thing. I was confused with why that was a lower Y and not an upper
thank you.
Y. Because I was like, are you talking about actually the human, or are you actually talking about names in which we were just talking about we don't say very often, right? So
Thank you. Both of you, well done. I always love it when my students call me out. That makes me feel terrific because it means that you've been listening and you know. I love that. That's awesome. So thank you. That's much better now. I agree. Okay. Good till here. Just the beginning, the blessings on food. Okay. The reason I put it in this order, this is actually the order of importance, meaning if you have different foods in front of you, this is the order that you should make the blessing. Now, there's a caveat to that. I don't remember if we discussed this. I just don't remember. But, and somebody who's had this class before might know it. But if you, what we call wash, meaning you wash, remember on Shabbat, people wash? I'm gluten-free, so I rarely wash, but it's code word. It's a buzzword in Orthodoxy to say, did you wash? Where do you wash? What does that mean? Where do you go to wash your hands before eating bread? And again, the bread has to be something that you make hamotzi lechem min haaretz, this specific blessing we're about to say, and only from these five. Why didn't I put them in the right order? That's silly.
I was gonna say, in going to like kosher restaurants, they always like have like a dedicated bread or like hand washing station if it's like they're serving bread, or if it's like a sit down meal. And
100%.
You'll see even like right by the sink, there's like a bowl of bread, and I think it's funny. So
well, the reason you do that is because it's very common not to speak in between washing your hands, and then to get back to the table and to figure out, it feels a little. So it's nice to have a little, and that happens, by the way, at weddings, Orthodox weddings as well, where they put that out. Okay, there we go. Those five. All right. So the thing is, if you wash for bread, one of these five, right, one of these five grains, you don't generally make any more blessings within the meal for food. The exception to that would be wine, probably. And some people say dessert, because dessert, even though we consider it part of the meal, it's not subsumed under bread because we don't usually have a piece of cake with bread, right? Bread is more of the main courses. Doesn't really cover dessert. And I think it used to be people didn't eat dessert so much. In any case, some people say special blessings on dessert, some people don't, but you can subsume it if you want under that. And that's what happens when you go someplace on Shabbat. People don't make the blessings on the food within the meal. So bread, roll, bagel, challah, matzah, does that make sense to people that these are all things that are types of breads? Now, I, as a gluten-free person, I often have bread that's not, it's not made of these. So therefore, the blessing is not this blessing. That's important to know, especially if somebody here is gluten-free. So then you would know that generally you don't end up making this blessing. I'll show you, for example. So this looks like matzah. If there's anything left in it. Right? Does that kind of look like matzah? Doesn't really if you look too closely, but it's made of like potato, I think, because it's kosher for Passover. So you make a different blessing on it because it's not made out of these 5 grains. If it was made out of oat, you never want to eat oat matzah unless you absolutely have to, like me. I'm gluten-free. It is not worth it. It's horrible. Okay, so this is the most important of all our blessings in the hierarchy of blessings. The caveat is that you don't actually make the other blessings when you do this one. So let's just practice it together. Let's say together, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. So stay on mute and say it with me. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. I'm wondering, is it helpful to you if I did this? If I made these, wait, let me do it differently. What if I did this? So you would know which one to emphasize. Would that be helpful? Is that helpful? Okay, great. So min is just one syllable, haaretz. So hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Did everybody get that? Oh, I'll do that with all of them. Good, this is getting better. Let's say it together. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. But now I'm going to do it here too. Baruch atah. I don't actually have to. This is like not writing God's name, but in English it doesn't matter. All right, so this will help you. This will help you figure out how to pronounce it, how to enunciate it. So let's do this, and then afterwards this, okay? I'm going to say it, and you say it with me on mute. Got it? Baruch atah. Here, I'll do this. Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Everybody got that? Great. Let's do the next one. This is the next of the most important of the next level of importance, wine or grape juice. Who knows why wine or grape juice is so important? Any thoughts? Guess. It's okay. Yeah, go, Jamie.
I was going to say because wine comes from grapes, grapes come from on the vine, being natural.
So that you could say is true for all fruits, but
Right.
only wine has its own blessing. There is no other liquid that has its own blessing. Now, anybody else? Yeah, Chelsea.
Because well, this is what I think, but it could be wrong. There's like a ceremonial like holiness to it, like a sacramental like.
Yep, it is actually, that is true, that it is used in many ceremonies in Judaism, like Kiddush on Shabbat or on holidays. When a couple gets married, there's going to be wine. Havdalah at the end of Shabbat. When else is wine used? Brit Milah, when a baby has a circumcision. Right, and you know, it always, people till today think of wine as, you know, the most, I think, the most, what would you call it? The most celebrated, praiseworthy. It's considered the finest liquid. I mean, maybe not everybody. I personally don't drink very much wine, but that's not the point. The point is that it is used in rituals. So for that reason, it was given its own blessing. So this, say it with me, Borei Peri Hagafen. Borei Peri Hagafen. Let's go back and do the whole bracha together. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Borei Peri Hagafen. So does that feel doable?
I
Right?
had a question.
Yeah.
And this is just a weird one, I guess, but like in terms of wine and grape juice or grape products, we press them in order to like extract their stuff.
Well, we don't, but the winemakers
Yeah,
do.
the people who are stomping on the grapes do. But I think it's similar to like olive oil or like pressing stuff
But you
like that.
don't drink olive oil, so you don't
Yeah,
make a special bracha on it. It's
but
used, it's not a main thing. It's used in addition. However, olives have a level of like, not holiness, but a level, I don't know how to say it in English. One second. There are 7 species which Israel is known for, and they have a higher level. In other words, if you had an olive and you had, let's say, an apple in front of you, many people would say, make the bracha on the olive first. It's the same bracha as on the apple because it's more important, because it's one of the 7 species. And the reason it is probably is what you were saying, because we use olive oil. I use them to light the Hanukkah. It was
that's what I
used
was
to light
thinking
the
of.
menorah in the temple, 100%.
I was thinking about like the sanctity of like
Yeah.
the food being pressed, and we don't like we press oranges and we get orange juice, but we say a different bracha.
We
And
say
it's like,
regular, right? But
yeah,
olive oil you don't drink. I bet if you
yeah,
drank olive oil, it might have had its own. That's cool.
I don't know.
All
So I
right.
thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So you have to look on bottles, because sometimes, like I was by my mother-in-law and she didn't realize that she had wine that was blackberry wine. It was made by Manischewitz or Muggin, whatever, Manischewitz. And it didn't say anything anywhere. And then all of a sudden I see, wait a minute, it's made from blackberries. And I said to her, you can't use this for Kiddush. It has to be made from Kiddush. She's like, you know, she didn't know. And I want you to know, I tried to get in touch with Manischewitz so many times. I finally sent them a message. I left the messages. I said, I think you have to mark on it that you can't use it for Kiddush because people don't realize. All I can tell you is the next time I went to my mother-in-law, she had that same bottle and it said on it, cannot be used for Kiddush. So if it was me, great.
There's one other thing that's like, I guess, regarding wine and just like the labels for the extra on them. A lot of things that are marketed towards Jews or like Jewish or Jewish adjacent, they're not necessarily kosher. So like you could have one grape product that is a wine and it's like Star of David wine and it's not kosher. So
Right. So people here know, I think, to look for the symbols.
okay.
I think people really, I mean, that's what we've taught.
Specifically for those things, they're just super deceptive, and that's just the reason why I wanted to like
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I tell you, I just heard this story. It was a great story. Somebody said that when she was, her kids were little, and like there was some stomach virus that ran through her family. So one kid got it, and the doctor's like, make them toast. So she runs out, she goes, she sees Wonder Bread, and it had a hechsher, it had an OU or something like that. And she brings it home, makes them toast. Great. Next week, the next kid has it. She runs out, buys the same bread of Wonder Bread, the same. And her husband walks in and says, why do we have lard in our bread? She's like, what? What do you mean lard? And he looks and she sees, oh, it's the same packaging. Everything looks the same, but it's not kosher. And she goes to ask the rabbi, and he's like, you fell into the 2 factory Wonder Bread sinkhole, you know, the trap. Turns out that there were 2 factories equal distance from where she was living, Pittsburgh. And sometimes one factory sent the Wonder Bread and sometimes the other, but it didn't occur to her to look because a week before she had just bought the same bread. So they actually had used it in the toaster. They had to throw away the toaster. You cannot make a toaster kosher. There's no way to kosher it. You have to put a blowtorch to it and it ruins it. So that was her lesson, but it's funny in retrospect. He's like, since when do we buy non-kosher products with lard in it? So yes, Josh, to your point, sometimes it's misleading. And just because it says and looks Jewish, by the way, the same thing. I went for an interview in Cleveland many, many, many years ago when I was in software for my first job. And they said, oh, we're going to take you to a kosher restaurant. I'm like, okay, what do I know? And they took me to a place called Corky and Lenny's, which is Jewish style. I mean, they had non-kosher things on the menu and they had meat and milk. So I saw very quickly that, they had cheese with the burgers. And I'm like, this is not kosher. Why? It says kosher style. Well, kosher style is meaningless. It's just a word. All it means is that, they serve gefilte, I don't know, something that's sort of, or deli maybe. It totally does not count. You cannot, don't allow yourself to be fooled. By the way, who knows what one of those symbols that you can't trust? Anybody know? That seems to be marked kosher, but it's not copyrighted. If you just see the letter K, yeah.
The K, I think.
K by
Exactly,
itself.
Latoya. Very good. If you just see the K by itself, not copyrighted. You can put K on ham, no problem. There's nobody checking you because it's not copyrighted. I know, right? So if you saw it on bacon, you'd be like, okay, something's wrong here. But if you see K on bread or on anything, you cannot. Just K by itself. That's like one of the biggest traps. I don't know if it's meant to be a trap, but it does work if you're not familiar. So I think I've sent you, but if not, I'll send you again the link to the sheet which has, the kosher symbols that we accept. What, Martin? Sorry, my husband is something he wants to say. He can't even hear what you're saying because I have my headset in here. Thank God, kosher bacon. Okay, I don't know what was funny about that, so you'll have to tell me later. Okay, all right, moving on. Everybody good? We got the first two brachot. Great. Now, this is very common. How often do you take a cookie or a cracker? Again, if you're not gluten-free, most cookies and crackers are going to be made from wheat, right, or spelt or something like that. So you're going to make this. You're going to make this bracha on it. So mazon is food, but mizonot has become the way to say cookies or crackers or anything. Pasta, I wrote pasta here. Any cereals made from one of these 5 grains, like Rice Krispies, is not this blessing because it's made from rice. But Cheerios, made from oats, happens to be gluten-free. Frosted Flakes, all the other, I don't know, whatever it is that you eat, cereal, you make this blessing on most of them, right? So you actually have to look and see what it's made out of. Corn, rice, like corn checks, rice checks, but wheat checks you would make it on, but not corn checks and rice checks. That make sense? Cool. Let's say it together. We're going to do borei minei mizonot, just that. Borei minei mizonot. Now we're going to do the whole thing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Borei minei mizonot. So if
I
you
have
were
a question.
Go, Chelsea.
Sorry, I have a million questions.
Oh, good. Ask. That's great.
No, it's okay. I just like
No,
one
we
right
want
now.
them. We want them. Yeah.
Would pizza be mezonot?
Pizza
Or
is one of the typical questions in a bracha speed because it's tough. Like, is it bread? Is it okay? It doesn't have a really good answer, but I'm glad you asked this. I'm actually going to go off share screen to talk to you a little bit better. I just have to get something to drink because my mouth got very dry. So 1 second. My blackberry tea, so yummy. Okay. There's a type of food it's called pocket bread. That would be the easiest way to say it in English. And it's not clear what is pocket bread, but you can imagine pizza would be like a pocket bread, right? Because it's bread that you sort of could fold over. It would be like it's filled with cheese and tomato sauce. You agree with me? Okay. But the dough might be kind of a dough that you can make bread out of. So, but because if you put like a fruit pastry, I'll give you an example. My mother is a phenomenal baker, and she makes the same dough she uses to make challah as she uses to make her yeast cake, her coffee cake. But the coffee cake has, raisins and cinnamon and sugar. And I don't know what else. It's delicious. You won't get to eat it because she lives in Israel, but it really is phenomenal. And then her challah is not as sweet, and it's not meant to be, right? It has different purposes. So the challah, you would make hamotzi lechem min haaretz, because it's bread, and the coffee cake, yeast cake, which literally smells like cinnamon and tastes even better, you would make on that borei minei mezonot. Why? Because it's a pocket bread, right? Because it's pocket, meaning it's filled with sweet or something. So it's always a question. So if it acts like cake or cookie and tastes like it, basically you don't make the blessing on bread. Like, do what it acts and tastes like. But pizza is a problem because pizza is sort of somewhere in the middle between the two. Some people, because it's complicated, what do they, first of all, wait, this is a great place to slip in another one. Do you make a different blessing on the cheese, the tomato sauce, and the bread, right? That would be one question. So generally, when you have bread or mizonot, right, it's either going to be hamotzi lechem min haaretz bread or borei minei mizonot, meaning a pastry of some kind, a pastry dough. Like, it's one or the other. Remember the order of importance in the table. So you would make that blessing, and then the cheese and tomato sauce are sort of not subsidiary. Is it subsidiary? They're not exactly subsumed, but they're lesser importance. I was thinking of subsumed, but there's another word for it, but I don't know what it is. But they're less important in precedence. So you would only make either hamotzi or mizonot on the dough part, because even though you're eating it sort of for the cheese and tomato, I mean, I guess if you scooped off the cheese and tomato, you would not make it. Then you would make a blessing on the cheese and tomato, right? But if you're eating it with the dough part, then you have to make the blessing on the dough part. And because it's not clear if you should treat it like bread or like kind of this pastry, so some people just wash on a piece of bread, make hamotzi lechem min haaretz on a regular piece of bread, and then eat pizza, and then do the benching, the grace after meals. But other people, and this is a prevailing halachic ruling, it depends on how much you eat. So if it's your whole meal, then you have to wash on it, meaning you have to make hamotzi lechem min haaretz, treat it like bread. So that usually is from 2 pieces and up. Most people say if you have only 1 piece of pizza, let's say 1 piece of pizza and salad, then you don't make the blessing on bread because it's not considered to be a full meal on its own. Or maybe a piece of pizza and soup. But most people don't eat 1 piece of pizza, but some do. So those are the ones that fall in the middle category, Chelsea, and they're hard to know what to do. So it's good that you're asking that question. And one option, again, is just take a piece of bread, make hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and eat the pizza. And the other one depends on how much you're going to eat from the pizza. 1 piece, make borei minei mezonot. If you want a second piece, I would wash then and make hamotzi lechem min haaretz on the second one. What's your other million? That was 1. You have another 999,000.
No, I'm good for now. Thanks.
Okay. So here's the thing. Sushi is complicated because all the parts of it are important. And a sushi bowl is even worse because they don't mix. You don't eat the whole sushi bowl together. Or what's it called? There's a different name. Sushi bowl. So really what I do is I take each one separately and make a borei pri adama on the edamame or whatever it is, the corn. And I would make a shahakol on another one. We haven't learned them yet, but we'll get to them. And the rice, it's interesting. You actually give it the same blessing, borei minei mezonot, as if it was one of the 5 grains, but the blessing afterwards is different. That's like crazy, but that has its own category.
Quick
By the way,
question.
one of the ways to do it is to Google it. Like, what do I make on rice? That's okay. You're allowed to Google it. Yeah, that's right.
So for sushi, are you saying that you take apart the sushi roll or you're saying the entire, what did you mean?
Sorry, Gabby, I'm laughing at what you wrote. I'm not laughing at you, Latoya. Yeah,
Let's
go
into
on,
the
say
chat
it again.
phone.
So what do I do with sushi?
Yeah.
It's a problem. I usually with sushi, I eat the whole thing together and I make a blessing on the rice because the rice is the most important to me. Yeah, that's what I do. Some people might take like a little piece of the fish and make a shakla. I don't know. But that's a good one to Google. I invite everybody to Google things like the tricky ones. You'll begin to learn what are the tricky ones. Like if you have cake and frosting, if you were just eating the frosting off of the cake, which I do because I'm gluten-free. So sometimes I eat the frosting off of my husband's cake. He's like, don't take all the frosting, leave me some. But he eats the cake part and I eat the frosting. So I'm only eating the frosting. I would make a blessing on the frosting. But if he's eating the cake with the frosting is not the most important part. The most important part is the cake. The frosting is kind of, you know, goes, what? Nothing. Did I answer everybody's question?
I was just gonna say that proportionately,
Yeah, go, Josh.
The amount of food, like if your thing is 70% bread, then you should probably make a, you know, a hamotzi or something. If
Well,
you're
no, anytime you take bread, it's hamotzi. Any sandwich is a hamotzi. If you're eating bread, bread is bread. Pizza is different because it's different. It's like in its own category. I don't eat pizza, so I don't really get that because I can't have bread or dairy. So who wants pizza that's non-dairy and non-gluten? Like, who even invented that? That's not even a thing. You know, it's not even pizza. It just might look like it. Yeah, Chelsea.
I have a question. When we're talking about like the order of importance and sort of what supersedes, you know, what else?
Supersedes, that was the word, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Would you, like, if you had a meal that had like if you had tofu with like peanuts on top,
Great.
would that be like, would you consider the tofu as like the main part of the meal? Or
so
like,
if you washed for bread, then you wouldn't make any bracha. But if you didn't, because you don't really necessarily need bread. So I actually make, like, if the peanuts are separate, like if it's all in one mush, that's one thing. But tofu is a shahakol. It's the catch-all one because it doesn't grow. It's not, it's made of soy, but it doesn't look like anything that's grown from the ground. So, so I would probably make a blessing. That's what I usually do. I make a borei pri adama on the vegetable part, or on the peanuts are also borei pri adama, and then I would make a shahakol on the tofu. That is what I do. Yes, that's a good example of things that are different, separate. Or if you had roast, I know you're vegetarian, you had chicken or roast with potatoes and carrots. So I would make a blessing on the potatoes or carrots because that's borei pri adama. And then even though you could say that the meat is more important than the potatoes and carrots because it's the main, so you could do it in either direction. You could either say it first, say them on the meat, but they don't mingle. You can't subsume one under the other like a sandwich. A sandwich, really, the inside of the sandwich is not the main part. Otherwise, you could eat it by itself and you wouldn't put it in bread. Once you start putting it in bread, it's an actual inherent difference to the food you're eating. No problem. No problem. Okay, let's just do the last blessing because I have more things to teach you. I want to teach you about marijuana brownies. I mean, I did promise you that, so I'm not going to leave you without it. Okay, so let's just do the rest of the blessings. So the next one is fruits from the tree are considered more important than fruits from the ground, which sort of makes sense, I guess. Anybody? I think it does. Because it's diversified. Everything is from the ground, but not everything is from a tree. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, all fruits and vegetables. So etz is tree. Let's say it together. Borei, peri, ha'etz. Let's just say the whole thing. Baruch, Ata, Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech ha'olam. Borei, peri, ha'etz. Okay? All right. So bananas and pineapples, grape juice or wine? No, I'm taking that off. That's confusing. Pineapples and bananas are not ha'etz, even though we say banana tree and pineapple tree. According to the laws of Jewish laws of making blessings, they're replanted every year, whatever it is. So you have to make the next one, and that is borei peri ha'adama. I'm going to do what I did before. This is great. So James, if you printed, you'll have to print again. Sorry. Well, that's a nice way to do it. Okay, let's say it together. Borei peri ha'adama. How did you get there? Let's put you back. Okay. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei peri ha'adama. Next, everything else falls in here. Everything. Because everything was shehakol, that everything, nihiyah, became into being, bidvaro, with God's words. Let's say it. Shehakol nihiyah bidvaro. That's confusing. Let me do it this way. Bidvaro. That's a better way to say it. Oh, is that clear? Bid. Maybe I'll do it this way. Yeah, that's a better way to do it with an I. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's say it from here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam shehakol nihiyah bidvaro. Okay. So these are the orders that I gave you. There is a lot more in here, which I think you can. So I didn't go into that, what you say afterwards. Maybe we can go into that next time. And by the way, I just remembered, I didn't do the Parsha of the week with you. I forgot about that. Really, I should just tell you to go watch Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Like, why bother telling you the Parsha? That's more fun anyway, right? That's pretty much where we are. Sorry, I forgot. But I do want to tell you about marijuana brownies. So what are the possibilities that you might say on marijuana brownies?
Mezzanote.
What are the options? James, unmute.
I mean, I would do the catch-all.
You would do the catch-all. Okay, shakol ni'abit baro. Why? I mean, it's a brownie. It's made of wheat flour. Tell me
Okay,
your
I'm
reasoning.
speaking personally because I really don't know the technical answer, so I'm just kind of talking out loud about
No,
this.
that's fine. I want to hear it. Yeah.
I would use the catch-all because it feels as though the food itself is almost so butchered and unauthentic that it's like not even bread, right? It's not
Wait,
even
not bread. This is a cake. This is the second level. Let's take out the marijuana. What would you say on a brownie?
the second one would definitely do this.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you're thinking that if you add marijuana, what if you added nuts to it? Would you also change what you would say?
I think I would probably do the catch-all.
Okay, so that's great that we're discussing it because it's still made of wheat and it's still borei minei mezonot. That doesn't change it. The nuts become part of it. They're not the most important. You're not eating it for the nuts, you're eating it for the brownie, and the nuts happen to come along. Same thing if you had raisins or craisins or something, or if you have apple pie. So apple pie, and it's good we're discussing it because you wouldn't know. Like maybe there's another rule I don't know about. So one second, Josh. So apple pie, you're eating it for the pie. Otherwise, you would just eat the inside. Well, some people eat the inside. If you're just eating the inside, you would make borei pri ha'etz, which is the fruits of the tree, because you're not eating the cake. But the cake part supersedes. But what could be the other option? What would be another option, not the second one, the borei minei mezonot? If you're having marijuana brownies, what would be a different option? Yes, Josh.
Oh, I was just going to ask if
Wait,
the
I want to
objective is-
answer this question first. Let me just finish this train of thought.
If the objective is to consume the marijuana, would it be a dama because you're
Right,
from
so
the-
that would be the other option. If you're
Yeah.
saying the marijuana is more important to me,
right?
and that's your objective, then that's the main component. Maybe it's borei pri adama because marijuana grows in the ground. Okay, but those would be, and James, I appreciate what you suggested. It was important to discuss it. Otherwise you won't know what bracha. But anytime you take anything made with wheat or, rye or any of those, it's either bread hamotzi or it's very rare. I'm not talking about if you make something and you put in just a spoonful of flour to hold it together. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when the main ingredient is flour. Okay? Okay. So the question here is, what's more important? Is it the brownie or is it the marijuana? That's the real question. That is the question that we're contesting. Like, that's what we're discussing. So one of the things is when the kids drew something on the board, I don't know how to draw. So somebody said, let me draw it on the board. So she had like red and green magic markers for the board, whatever they're called, and board markers, erasable. And she drew a brownie in red because she didn't have brown. And then she drew little marijuanas, in green, like little, they look 3. So she drew little marijuana plants. And when I came in the next time, I had researched it and I said, guess what? That is not what marijuana brownies look like. The green disappears and it just becomes part of the brown. It's not like you see the marijuana. Remember what I said? If you make applesauce with chunks of apples, and if you make creamy applesauce, that's not the same blessing. Because in the chunks of apples in the applesauce, you see the apples. They're still in their original form. But in a smooth applesauce, it's just mushed up. So you say a shahakol, the catch-all, if it's all mushed up. But if there are chunks of apple in the applesauce, you would say the blessing on fruits of the tree. So I said, your brownie doesn't look any different, meaning the marijuana has disappeared. It's not in its natural looking state. Okay, so that's one issue. But there's still the issue that Josh said, but maybe you're eating it for the marijuana, in which case it still should be what James said, shakol, right? Because mushed up marijuana is shakol. But here's the thing. It's true you're eating it probably for the marijuana, but you chose to eat it in a brownie because brownies are tasty and that's the way it tasted good to you. So you're still eating the wheat brownie because it's yummy. And that still supersedes. And the marijuana part just becomes one of the many ingredients. Sugar, butter, eggs, whatever you put in it, doesn't matter. And the marijuana, but you know what? It wasn't obvious to me. I didn't know the answer until I researched it. So don't think I just didn't know. First of all, I didn't know that you don't see the marijuana inside. You don't see green bits. And the second was that that's because you choose to eat it in a brownie form, you still have to make the blessing on the brownie. So that you can now apply this to many other situations. Not every situation, but others. That's what I wanted to give you, was the rules, the kind of rules of thumb. I think that's a lot to teach, like all the blessings. And, we learned a lot of laws, which I didn't put in, but I felt that was important. So I'm happy to answer questions. I don't want to go through the second half. I think it's important to go through. We go through it a different time. But I think that's enough for that. I would love to give you a little bit of the parsha, but I want to make sure if you have any other questions about food and blessings, I mean, you can always ask them in any class. You know that, right? But I'm happy to answer any more questions now if it's applicable.
I like the discussion about the sort of volume. I'm equating that in my brain and how we have kind of practice is the volume of the ingredient in any sort of toast, right?
It's actually really important because, like, for me,
because I'm thinking like
yeah,
chocolate covered strawberries.
Great question. Which is the more important, the strawberry or the chocolate?
And we could have a debate about that probably for millennia.
Well, yes, you're right. But unless you I just had them yesterday. That's so funny. So but if you broke off a piece of chocolate, right, because they come off, and you just ate it by itself, you have to make the shahakol. But if you're eating a bite of strawberry with chocolate covered, the strawberry is how you chew. It's the conveyor of the chocolate. So, it's a hierarchy. So you still have to make a Borei Pri Adama on the strawberry. The chocolate doesn't make the strawberry bracha disappear. So that's a great question. But if you broke off a piece of chocolate, you have to make a shahakol.
That was the only one that I was thinking of because we just had them last week. So I was curious.
No, that's a great question. Those are great questions. I appreciate the question.
I was going to ask if you don't know like where something grows, like if you don't know if it grows in a tree,
Google it.
What if it's on Shabbat and you can't Google it?
So look, you can always do ha'adama because that covers ha'etz. Because if it grows from the tree, it grows from the earth.
Okay.
Like
That's
if you're not sure if this is an annual or like a banana or pineapple, like, so.
and then do you just like make your way down the hierarchy if you progressively just don't know and you don't have the ability to find out?
Well, yes, except, well, not exactly, because if you had a cracker and it's gluten-free, it would be shahakol.
Mhm.
It's not beret priyadzama, beret priyadzama, because it's
Yeah.
not it doesn't look like a fruit. So it's not exactly true to do that. That's more the order. Like theoretically, if you were taking grapes and a brownie, you should make the blessing on the brownie first, eat it first. But if you want to have the grape first, it's okay. Make a bracha on the grape and then make a bracha on the brownie. Like that's fine. So that's like nuance within order of blessings.
There's like one other really weird thing. I don't know if you're
Yeah,
familiar with cauliflower fried rice.
I am.
Or like dishes that are they take the name of one thing, but they're not that thing.
Like what?
I the only one that I could really think of is like cauliflower fried rice, but like specific like the chicken products, not like chicken products.
Oh, so those are, but anyway, chicken is shahakol.
Yeah, but
And
like
anyway, those products are
are probably
processed. They
gonna be
don't
shackle
look,
anyway.
well, yeah, because they don't look like the original form of the edamame or soy or whatever it
Yeah.
is that you're eating. Yeah, but it's a good question.
Okay.
I mean, it's funny because chicken and meat and eggs, like there's, and fish, they're staples, and yet they're
Yeah.
shahakol. It's as if they're lowest on
There's
the list. But really, what it has to do with is that we're grateful. Like we see that the fruits, I mean, I don't know why they set it up that way. I think if I had done it, I might have said proteins have their own bracha, but
yeah.
nobody asked me.
There's one
I
that's just
wasn't in the
made.
subcommittee that decided on the blessings. I wasn't even born yet, and it doesn't matter because they never would have asked a woman. So, let's be reasonable. Yeah. So, but thank you for bringing that up as well. That's helpful. Any other questions that are relevant that are popping up?
What is cauliflower fried rice?
It means it's not real rice. They rice the cauliflower and then it looks like rice, but it's healthier. It's not a starch, it's a vegetable. I happen to not like it. I was so surprised because I love cauliflower. I have yet to find a way to eat it that tastes good, but I like zoodles, which is zucchini noodles. Those I like so. And sweet potato zoodle, like whatever they're called, where you spiralize. I didn't spiralize them, I bought them that way, but I actually like those. But see, those still look like the vegetable. They don't have the shape, but they still, I think those I would still say a beret priyadzama on. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. I'm going to zip through a few things of the parsha so you'll be up to date because last week, you had one last week, right? You had a class with Hannah. You didn't have a class last week. Right, last week was
No,
off.
the week before.
So do people here know the story of Joseph and the brothers?
Yeah.
Mostly? Okay. So, it's mostly that which is happening in these parshiot. What happened in the last two was that there's did you learn about Joseph and his dreams? The dreams of the butler and the baker and all that? Did you hear about that?
Yeah, we finished when he unveiled himself in front of his brothers.
You did? That's this past week. That's weird. Okay, so she went ahead. That's great. Okay,
And
he
then she said,
unveiled.
okay, we have to
Just
stop.
It just happened two days ago when we read it on Shabbat. He reveals himself. Everybody with me on this? That he reveals himself to his brothers or not? Some. Okay. I really want to suggest that you watch the movie. It literally will tell you a lot of it. Plus, it's awesome music, or read about it. But he reveals himself to his brother. He's the viceroy of Egypt, and he says to them, "You sold me into slavery, but I don't want you to berate yourself for that. Like it's done is done. I can see that you have repented. I see how you treat my younger brother Benjamin. You care about him. Judah, you were even willing to be a slave in his stead." I don't know if people here heard the story that Joseph planted his cup, his goblet in Benjamin's sack, and then ran after them to say, "Somebody stole my goblet." And of course, they knew he was framed, but they didn't know why. And Judah finally steps up. Everybody with me when I say, or am I like totally losing? You got it? Okay. So Judah's like, no, I'm willing to be there in his stead. There's no way I'm going to hurt my father like that. And this is not the same Judah who was willing to hurt his father by saying Joseph was killed. Joseph sees a different person, and he sees the brothers have repented, and he says to them, "I forgive you. I believe that God orchestrated. You still shouldn't have done it," right? Just because God wanted it to happen, you didn't have to be the vehicle that made it happen. But if you've repented, then I also forgive you. They were still kind of nervous and scared because he's viceroy of Egypt. But it seemed to be okay. And they went and brought Jacob, Yaakov, their father, down with everything else. It's really the first exile, you could say, except that the Jewish nation hadn't become a nation yet. They were just a family still. But it was kind of the first exile because they left the land of Canaan, and they went to Egypt, Mitzrayim. And what else happens I have to get to Vayechi. So what else happens, Vayigash? I think Jacob dies. Oh, Paro interviews him. He says, I want to meet you. He had heard about him. And this is actually kind of beautiful. I read this today. He says, tell me about your life. And he says, my life was long and bitter. Like even the fact that he was reunited with his son couldn't erase the bitterness of his life, which was sad and understandable. It's very hard to actually let it all go. It's just normal psychological. And then Jacob ends up dying. God appears to him actually on his way down to Egypt to say, do not worry, I will be with you. I will make your nation great. And so maybe that comforts him a little bit. And then when he dies, Paro allows Joseph to bring him, he has this huge funeral, brings him back up to Canaan and buries him in the cave of the patriarchs and matriarchs. We've spoken about that. Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, the three patriarchs and their wives are buried there. And then basically no, that didn't happen yet. That's going to happen in this week's parsha. Sorry. That Jacob gets to the end of his life. We're going to read this coming Shabbat. It's the last parsha, the last passage in the book of Genesis. We're actually finishing. By the way, who knows what we say at the end of a book? Go, Josh, go. Unmute.
Chazak, Misfazik.
Chazak, v'nitchazek. We will be strong. Be strong, and we will be strong together. And we will continue to the next book, basically. That's what it means. So the beginning of this parsha is Vayechi Yaakov, that Jacob lived. It says how long he lived, and he calls Joseph in and his children in, and he calls all his other sons in, and he gives them each blessings. And the blessings say their strong points and their weak points. There's a lot to learn from that. But that's basically what happened. And now the brothers are in Egypt, but I think Joseph also dies in this parsha. He actually is the first brother to die, even though he was almost the youngest. And Paro does not allow him to be buried back in Canaan, in Israel. That's the original Canaan. Doesn't allow him, maybe because he was second in command. And they actually put him in a coffin, which we're told went into the Nile because they wanted the Nile River to be blessed by Joseph. The Egyptians believed that Joseph brought blessing to their country. It's a very short passage, this coming week's parsha. It's the blessings, but it's very short. And this is a very long saga. This book of Genesis spanned hundreds of years because it came from the creation of the world until Jacob died and Joseph. The next books they're going to be like a shorter amount of time, kind of stretched out. This is the most picturesque, or I think the book of Genesis, the most interesting to teach and to learn about stories. But when Hannah comes, Hannah will be here next week, and she'll tell you about the beginning of Exodus. And that's the next big story, and that's when the Jewish people become a nation. Jeff has asked me also that I could send out the emails on Sunday, so I'm trying to start doing that so that you know if there is one or isn't one. There will be one next week, but not on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We're having a program at the Bayit, but it's it's a holiday, so we won't. And I still want everybody to make time to. Any questions, by the way? Nothing. Okay, we're good.
I have one question. Sorry, but it's not about this. Is it okay if I ask?
Of
It's
course.
about Sefer Torah. Is Sefer Torah the same as Torah?
Oh, that's a good question. So Sefer means book, and Sefer Torah is the book of Torah, which is the scroll, that you lift up, that they read from in the shul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's Sefer Torah. So it is Torah, but Torah is also used loosely. It's also used not just to mean the Torah. If you say the Torah, you could mean the Sefer Torah, the actual scroll. It could mean you mean all the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash. It could mean that you mean any teaching of Jewish teaching. So you have to know the context, Mariana. That's the problem.
Okay, I get it. Because I was
That's a good
reading
question,
a book. I was reading a book a letter in the scroll, and they were using
Oh, that's by Rabbi Sachs?
yeah,
Yeah.
and they were using like a lot of terms of that. That's why I got
Yeah.
a little
No,
confused.
that's great that you asked. I love when people ask questions like that. That's very helpful. All right. So Jamie had to jump off. Great. No problem. All right. People good with what? Okay. This is what I want. I want everybody to start. You can start by taking one bracha, just one, and practice that one. Do it on cookies, do it on fruit, whatever it is that you feel is useful to you. The hamotzi lechem min haaretz you might do anyway on Shabbat when you sit down for the meal. So for sure you should do that one on Shabbat when you sit down for the Shabbat meal. But even I take oat rolls on Shabbat because that's gluten-free, and I make hamotzi. But during the week, like they don't really sell oat bread. It's not worth it to me. So I don't usually do it during the week. But pick at least one bracha. Could be shakol midvaro, which is on all drinks except for wine or beverages, and on eggs and fish and chicken, and many many other things. And so you could pick that, but try to commit to that one of them for the next week, okay? And if you feel comfortable, the next week you'll take a second one. And if you don't, spend one more week on it, and then take the next one. It shouldn't take you too long. I mean, keep practicing it. You're gonna get it. It's a lot to do all of them at once, okay? But after a while, I really believe it'll be easier. I do. All right, my friends. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Good night.
Sure. Be well. Good night.